Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatiron's Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatirons.tuning.com and stay tuned with Flatiron's Tuning.
The back of it's going to look like the VSC, 2024 WRX chassis or whatever.
With big old engine sticking out.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, look in the back of one of those cars is like, this is a Subaru?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Subaru adjacent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's.
Cold opens are back.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 420.69.
150.
He's been saving that for months at this rate.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this episode to say it because it's episode 420.69.
Okay.
Yep. What is it actually?
157, I believe. 157.
Seems like yesterday.
157 or 158.
It seems like yesterday I was hearing you being like, oh my god, it's been 100 episodes.
Well, that's still a lot.
Was that one of the first ones? Did we do that live here?
Yeah. That was the first live one. Haven't really gone back to that. I don't know. Maybe we'll do it again. We'll see. I don't know.
This podcast started with a shitty little recorder.
Yep.
On the other side of this wall.
Yep.
Hanging around the cubicles.
In the tube. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now look at us. Look at how far we've come.
Professional.
We're professionals.
6 feet.
We've come 6 feet. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's probably
That's
about
fair.
right.
That's about right. All right, well, let's dive into it. Folks, welcome back to the Flatiron Syndicate Podcast. We're here in the shop. We've got Tasso and Jeremy. Tasso from OTC Racing, Jeremy from Money Shift Rally. Familiar faces to you guys by now, probably if you've watched, the last handful of podcasts.
Been a little while though.
It has been a while.
Yeah.
It has been a while since we've been in the shop, and so, well, all right. So the topic on my mind, and I threw this out there, and Jeremy, I think you agree that this would be interesting. Is I've been thinking, especially post the Cobb EPA settlement, of how modifying a car today, 2024, compares to say like 5 years ago. So like 2019, 2018. Because there's been a lot of changes, both for the good and for the bad, possibly, in that last 5 years. But it really feels different to me now than it ever has before, and it's like significantly different with all these changes. And so that's kind of what's been on my mind. And so I wanted to throw that out there to you guys first, and maybe just see what your initial take on it was, and then we'll meander on to some of what you guys have been up to as well. Mm-hmm. So, to start, Jeremy.
As the resident person who's just been in a race car that was still running on a Cobb access port, tuning now versus 5 years ago, I think if your street car, like, your daily, your modified daily, in the Subaru world, it's kind of mostly the same. There's still parts you can go out and buy and bolt onto your car, and then you could...
This is not the direction I thought you were going to go with this.
Versus 5 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, let me give you some background. When I started really getting into like the internals of Subaru's workings and tuning and stuff like that, most of the people I knew were running an OTS map on their access port.
Okay.
Right? Nowadays, still do that.
Sure. Yeah, it's true.
The parts have changed a little bit. Like if you were gonna be like, hey, I just bought this car. I just bought this 2018 WRX, second owner or something. You're not taking the TGVs off.
Right.
But you're probably still getting an access port on Facebook Marketplace and putting an OTS tune on it along with your intake and I don't know, whatever other small mods you're doing, right?
Probably. Well, I guess there's even like a year ago or 2 years ago, really before any of the flex fuel came back, it was much more limited. Sure. And then now it's kind of back to the point where at least up to like light to moderate bolt-ons, there's a path, there's a formula, there's off-the-shelf maps for all of this sort of thing. Flex fuel is now becoming an option again for a lot of the cars that had flex fuel options before. So there's a lot of similarities.
Arguably, the flex fuel options now are better than they used to be.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
In terms of the way they're integrated into the car, you're not like disconnecting factory parts and replacing them so much.
and you're running it over the CAN bus.
You're running it over the CAN bus.
Oh, that's true, I guess. CAN bus has opened up a whole other
Yeah.
world here.
Yeah.
I've not really been a fan of Cobb's existing like flex fuel kit for the older cars, like the 04 to the GD STIs, because of the way they hijack factory inputs. That's how they had to do it.
They had to do it, yeah.
And the actual concept of the box that did it was like, there are better ways to do it now, right?
Yeah.
Using canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. For modified dailies, aren't we about the same place as 5 years ago?
I would say for like 85 to 90% of the people with modified dailies at this point now, very little has changed, because I'd say for like the people that want to modify their cars, a lot of times even doing a bolt-on turbo was something that was a little bit beyond how far they wanted to go. So like if you're not for everybody, but
Yeah, okay.
for like 85 to 90% of it,
Mm-hmm.
a majority,
Mhm.
they didn't want to go beyond the stock turbo, and so like for stock turbo stuff, I think we're kind of back to where we were.
And for the FAs, for the FA cars, so the 2015 and newer WRX, those are always a different bag than the STIs, right? Or the EJ powered cars.
Yeah. Well, and there was no need to bolt on a bigger turbo, because you could basically tune the power with the stock turbo to the point where you basically cause your rods to bend before
Right.
anything else.
I think my perspective on this whole thing is coming from like the GD side of stuff. Even though the cars aren't 5 years old at this point, still that's where the tuning culture and
That's where it developed.
market support though was. And maybe the other thing happening here is that like the next thing you know, it's 5 years later and it's not actually the stuff that you're thinking about was 5 years ago, and maybe that's what's happening in my head
Sure.
here, right? It's like
Yeah. The time
because
machine
like
effect.
5 years ago in my head is everyone running around stage 2 off the shelf downpipe, and it was like if you had a Subaru, the first thing you did was put a downpipe on it, go stage 2 off the shelf, and then you were part of the community.
Right.
And you can't do that at all anymore, right?
True.
So it's completely different than 5 years ago, but this is also not taking into account the fact that those 2019 and now 2020 cars are 5 years old by model year, you know.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
they
that's
sold a
messing
lot
with
of
me.
They sold a lot of VAs.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They're probably going to continue selling a lot of EVs.
Maybe we'll hope.
Yeah.
I mean, the sales numbers are not doing as good as the
maybe
VA.
so. Right.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's it's an interesting chassis. We now have one, and we're going to start playing with it. And I think it's different, but it has some things that are going for it for sure. But it is definitely different. And then
So if you have an EJ powered Subaru, what does the future of tuning look like?
Standalone. Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
This is an adapter, so you plug in your car to whatever standalone you want. Link now has a standalone for the VA, right? And they have plug-and plays for every other U.S. market car at this point, which is pretty cool.
Plug and play stuff gets really locked down though. Like Haltech makes plug and play stuff for the Subarus, but they can't sell it in Colorado.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
true.
And in a lot of places in the United States, and I with Link, I don't know. There's an X factor for how long that's going to be a viable option.
Yeah, but it's not like they don't sell a lot of them. They don't sell as many things as access ports, right? They don't sell as many standalones as access ports.
Well, and again, it's like
So-
it's because the number of people that want to go beyond like what stock turbo is it's a slice of the market, but it's a smaller slice than you would often
But
think.
hypothetically speaking, say you are in the boat of this race car that I was just in a couple weekends ago. That is mostly stockish stuff. It's a race car. It's a rally car. It's emission stuff. No cats. I think the TGVs are deleted on it.
Should have a cat. Not a good cat.
Oops.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Don't listen, Preston.
A bunch of stuff deleted on it. It's running a tune, it's running a nice dyno tune, but the tune is out of date compared to the kind of the little parts that have changed on the car over the years for structure different size. How do you retune it? It's not on access port today. Wow. Okay. How do we tune it? Well, we get this thing and we
Standalone.
standalone it because it's a race
Did
car.
we still have Access Tuner 5 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 20.
You mean the public version, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that went away earlier. I want to say that maybe not,
Yeah.
or if it might have just gone away.
No, Access Tuner went away with Greenspeed.
That was before that.
Right.
So we still had it. I mean, I feel
I think
like
so.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, this thing is that if you have something that is race car adjacent or heavily stuff deleted on it, maybe you've cut your math wires and you've done your speed density stuff and you don't have TGVs anymore because your flex fuel sensor's plugged into it and you need to retune it. You're not doing it with an access port.
It's really they're part of the issue that we have kind of walked into as enthusiasts is this very blurred line between street car and race car. And so, it's the race car that you dailied for many, many years before, like you could do that. You could think about your car in terms of a race car. You could make parts choices, tuning choices, etc. in terms of a race car. I mean, it's almost like you could build your race car and drive it on the street for, say, 2 or 3 years while you were getting ready to actually take it off the road, put a cage in it, and then get a Corolla as a daily or something like that. But now the ability to kind of like build your daily into a race car in process is much, much less. And I think now there's much more of a hard break between street car and race car. And I think, to a certain extent, for good reason, because to a certain extent, the race car mentality is what has kind of gotten us in a little bit of this hot water.
Legally
as a
speaking,
community.
Everybody's much better off if the race cars are race cars and the street cars are not race cars. Because, the more crackle tune cars you got on the road, the more people who aren't car people are like, those kids.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I don't know. It's,
that's
a hard
tune a stock car though.
Yeah,
that's true.
Sure.
That's true.
But this is my point though. Is like I'm a race car guy, and there's a guy who lives in my neighborhood who's got a really crackly tuny Focus, and I'm like, whenever he goes.
There's a kid in my neighborhood that had a Focus with a crackle tune, and I don't know where he worked, but I'm guessing it was something where he was coming home late at night, like 10 o'clock at night, and just driving through the neighborhood with this crackle tune that was like bouncing off all of the houses, and it was just I'm sure that there was many neighbors that were like trying to figure out who he was so that they can have a word. Not a good word. It would not be a happy word.
Yeah.
But,
I love crackle tunes, by the way.
Huh?
I love crackle tunes. I know it's like gets used as like the pariah of the car community or something like that.
It's
for like
time and a place.
I don't know.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I still love a blow off valve and a crackle tune and just a car on its nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time and a place.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's time and place for everything, sure. But it definitely that's what's hard is like, there's so many things in the enthusiast community, like crackle tunes and all this sort of thing, where if you've been following and watching along, or I don't know what the inspiration would be at this point, following YouTubers and whatnot, and dreaming of the day that you could build a car that looks a bit like this, sounds a bit like this, whatever, and today is that day.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to build a car into like what you maybe have been dreaming of since 5 years ago, it's more challenging or just straight not possible in the same way today as it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, and you got to start an LLC in Montana.
Yeah, or Vermont or wherever.
Yeah,
where all the weird shenanigans are.
Yeah.
I got a buddy that just picked up a bug eye at work. This is a work buddy.
Nice.
And it had a bad motor. He said it was like a barn find, and I said no, it wasn't. It was someone's dumped project probably. But nonetheless, he's getting it back together and wants to make it like a little fun daily and stuff. Yeah. And he asked me like, what should I do about it? Right? He said it has like some downpipe on it right now, but otherwise pretty stock. I'm like, you can't really deal with that tune in like a fun daily budget, right? Unless you're, there's people that do, because like I think like the Audis and stuff like that have become so crazy prevalent in the car market because they come with a certain amount of like financial backing to make these things work out in like the fun daily budget level. But the Subarus, I've been saying this for years now, go back 100 podcasts. Subarus are the new Hondas, and there's no Honda engineering level way to make a fun fast daily with more power. So my advice to him was just go back to stock, like stock TGV, stock tune, stock downpipe. At least you could do a catback or something like that on it, fine, to make a little bit more noise. But stock car, it'll start great in the cold. It's fine. It's a GD, so even a stock GD is better than a tuned GR.
It's a WRX.
Yeah, it's a WRX.
So is it
a little
2
bug
liter?
eyed up. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's a fine little car. Like, just don't worry about the power thing. Just make it stock. Put a fart can on it, and just have fun. Right? It's
Sure.
because unless you want to dump non-Honda levels of money into it, you're not going to tune it for like you're not going to make it like a fun little daily in the way that I think that some of us came up in Subarus like a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think expectations have changed, right? Like a bug eye, it was fast and fun for its time, and nowadays it's like
Okay, a Jeep Grand Cherokee smokes it on the highway pools.
exactly
Yeah, sure.
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Oh boy.
But
Well,
there are some fast Cherokees.
I was
out there.
I was
Okay.
saying this earlier. I like driving my 2001 Outback rear-wheel drive swap.
Yeah.
Because I speed less in it, among other things.
Yeah.
Because it's slow compared to my 3.6 liter 2010 Outback, which is not fast, but is still fast enough to get me in trouble with the highway patrol.
I talked about this at one point in the evolution of my car. It became not fun anymore to like canyon carve in it because it became too fast. Like it was going to be a danger to myself, road bikers, other cars,
and
stuff like that.
Once you get it to the point where you're making enough power that you can outrun your traction, your suspension, your brakes, then you've got to be way more aware of those other parts of the car, the other systems on the car that you can overstress and outrun because
they were all. I mean,
sketchy things can happen at that point.
The car at that point was already like a championship-winning, record-holding car, and it was no longer fun. Like I wanted another car now suddenly that was slower, that had good driver feel, good noises, stuff like that, but half the power, half the handling, half the brakes, so that I could actually drive it and have fun and not feel like I am going to kill somebody.
Well, so I'm trying to put myself back because my yellow WRX, I drove that for a long time with the 2-liter engine in. I drove it for a decent while with just the stock turbo and, like you said, turbo exhaust and a reflash for a handful of years. Then I just put on a bolt-on turbo and injectors, got it retuned, and drove it for another number of years. And I think even with I was running the Evo 316G, and I think I was tuned up to like 230, 240 horsepower. So nothing crazy at all, like especially by modern standards.
But that's a fast car.
But it was fun and it was fast. I knew I was missing the low end, and
Sure.
And I wanted something more. And the biggest motivator for me to put the 2.5 into it, thinking back, was when I had taken the car to High Plains. The issue is that I was having fun driving the car. I enjoyed driving it at the track, but like the bigger cars, like the Corvettes, the Porsches, they would just leave me for dead on the back straights. It was slow enough to the point where I felt like I was having to drive in my mirrors a lot more.
Well, the shitty part about that, though, is that once you make a Subaru that can keep up with the Vet on the back straight, it sucks everywhere else. Because you're dealing with heat management problems.
Sure.
You're dealing with your brakes, smoking your brakes, hot temps. You can't do as many laps as you want.
Well, which I ran directly into,
Right.
but solved with another big brake kit. But
right, this is like, okay, how many
yeah.
Hondas did your
Starts adding up.
big brake kit cost?
Oh, geez, at this point, current exchange rate would be like 3 Civics.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe 4. But I guess where I was going, there's two parts to this story. One is that if you're happy with the car that you have and it's fast enough for what you're doing. I mean, I enjoyed everything about driving the car. It's just that it got to the point where I was driving with enough faster cars that it just was not as enjoyable of an experience to drive on the track, and that's where I figured, okay, well, and knowing what I knew at the time even was putting in the 2.5 and adding more or less an extra 100 horsepower, like that was the missing piece of the equation, and that's what I did. Could still be done today, but I think it could be done because if you kept all the emissions devices on the 2.5 and then just tuned it for the extra displacement, I think you could still gain a decent amount of power. I don't know if you gain 100 horsepower.
But you're skimming over a step there and they just tuned it.
Well, no, because if you keep all the emissions devices.
Tunes are illegal in Colorado because a tune is an emissions device.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And how are you going to just tune it?
Well,
standalone.
Well, Well,
with
yeah.
an access
Let's
You're gonna
be,
go back
let's be
to
honest
hiding
about this.
standalones under the carpet and
A
stuff like
tune
that.
in an emission state, in an emission, a tune is part of the emission system, technically speaking.
Yes,
all the
true,
things that are
true.
I mean, it's goofy when you just think about the list of parts on your car that are considered part of the emission system. Your gas pedal
Yeah.
is part of the emission system, technically.
Sure.
So even those pedal commanders are technically illegal. The things
True.
that adjust your pedal mount
Yeah.
are technically not legal
Well,
in the state of Colorado.
Bug eyes, it's a cable. It's a cable throttle.
So you better not tighten that cable too much.
Well,
It's a tune.
yeah.
No,
Eventually,
it's
eventually.
But it's. I mean, the point of the statement is that like the hard part of the whole equation is the part that we yada yada away with just tune it for that, right?
So say you're California, California's a little harder, but
California's
say
a
you're
lot harder.
New York, New Jersey, Colorado. What's the next state that's gonna?
Are we not doing carb rules in Colorado now?
We are,
No, we are.
but they just don't. They're not as good at testing here. So
They'll figure it out. So soon.
They're working on
They're
it.
working on it. Yeah.
But this is my point. So, I mean, so say you're in one of these like states that are getting a little harder on modified cars. What are you going to do? You're going to take your car, you're going to modify it a little bit, intake, exhaust stuff that makes it more personal and gives you a little power bump, and maybe you even do a Dynatune. But you need to be able to put the stock flashback on when you go to the emissions.
Right. And this is the other point is that at the time, like, I knew what my options were, and I went down the path of exploring those options. But now the options being like you can get up to a certain threshold, and then beyond that threshold, a lot of the options just don't exist like they used to. And so you that's what is most different, I think, for us as enthusiasts is that in the before times, if you had a car that you loved, like, I mean, I still just love my Bug-Eye wagon.
Yeah.
Like, I've driven that car for years and years and years. Love it. Don't want to get rid of it. I can kind of build it into what I want it to be. Like, even if it takes me 10 years, I know where my endpoint is that I want to get to, and you can build it in this direction. But, like, starting now, and, like, the most interesting study, or interesting test case of this, in my mind, is actually the new VB.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could get a VB and you can really like that car. I think just getting into it and driving it, daily driving it, there's a lot of things you could like about that car. You could get attached to it. But if you wanted to turn it into, a race car down the road, you could, but you're not going to be able to do it like in gradual stages, kind of like what we used to be able to do.
You buy a VB. You're going to go to one of the shops that does Subarus, and there's a lot of them in Colorado, and I know a bunch of them in the rest of the country. You're going to give them a stack of money, and then you're going to get back a car that makes like 350 to 400 wheel with some bolt-ons and a dyno tune, and it'll be fine. Like, the
VB specifically
right.
is.
We could have been there with the VA, except for two things: A, Cobb, and B, the bottom end was too weak.
Yeah. That car was limited. Yeah, engine was not nearly as durable as the 2.4, and then they both have the same drivetrain limitation. Yeah.
And the fact, and I say Cobb just in the sense that the fact that you had an access port that meant that a lot of people did their own modifications of, I buy these parts, and I can download this tune file and put it on, and that's the fact that there's more of a less support from Cobb for doing that. Their OTS maps are all green speed compliant now, right? So it means that the tunes are safer because it means you got less parts, you got less stuff going on. You're going to make less power, and less power is safer. And then
potentially,
yeah. I mean, I look at it as like having. I've worked on a number of VAs. I haven't worked on any VBs, but I've worked on a number of VAs, and there's like every few months somebody I knew blew up their VA because they had a crappy OTS tune on it. And I think that's less of a thing now. I think it's gonna be less of a
well,
thing.
it was way easier to push those cars past some threshold where you're going to cause an engine failure or drivetrain failure or both.
Right, and all Subarus ever, they're really sensitive to things not being quite right.
That was the first direct ejected car. I mean, there was definitely a learning curve with those cars. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that had to be figured out for sure.
I saw a Facebook post couple months ago, but it stuck out to me. That's why I remember it. This guy had just bought a Bug-Eye that had like 200,000 miles on it. Put bolt-ons on it and went to the dyno. It was all stock when he bought it. He was like,
Okay.
and he's basically like complaining on Facebook that his engine blew up. Like, Subarus suck.
Sure, yeah.
Because he put 200. Because he put bolt-ons on it on a 200,000 mile engine from 20 years ago. Went to the dyno and the tuner said, "You sure it's a good idea?" And then it blew up during a pull. Like,
Yeah. I had the same conversation with that same friend I just talked about, right?
Oh,
He's
man.
like, "Oh, should I put like a whatever on it, some injectors or intake or something like that?" I'm like, until you figure out how you're going to tune for it.
and it happens. to
No,
Right.
Like it's
Right.
Like,
and-
if that car's on its original motor, what's the oil pressure like?
No, yeah, it's
exactly.
and that's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
Subarus get that bad rap. I think so much because it's something we haven't even talked about for as a community for a long time. Is like the unreliability of Subarus, but it comes from the Honda mentality with Audi financial needs in order to make the car, nice.
Yeah. Well, and so this is the irony is that well for a street car we're a little bit more limited. We're more limited past a lower threshold than say 5 years ago. But now there's better technology than we've ever had, and there's more understanding than we've ever had, and like standalones now are, I mean, back in the early days, way more than 5 years ago. But when things like the Hydra were coming out and stuff like that, the really hardcore guys that were set on doing it would put in a standalone.
It's the Matrix. They're just
And-
there.
well,
it's just numbers running down.
They
the
were
screen.
always
Yeah.
fighting with the cars.
Yeah.
They were always fighting with the cars, and it was this was one of the reasons where a lot of the people that were kind of like trying to gradually build to a race car
Yeah, it's so
standpoint
sketchy and they were
stay
crazy
with-
expensive too.
Right.
Yeah,
Right?
they were glitchy. They were very finicky.
But this is
Yeah.
where I think, and sorry, controversial statements. This is
Okay.
where I keep saying to everybody who will listen, Cobb held us back there. Because for the longest time, the VAs were not defined in open source. It's only recently that you can actually really tune a VA car with open source.
Well,
tuning.
direct injection.
It's
Oh,
not-
yeah.
but the point is that
Yeah.
the access ports were so good that nobody needed to open source tune. Nowadays, you go online and everybody's like, "Oh, I'm chucking my access port in the trash. I'm going open source because they want to, they don't like being told that they can't, adjust their, that turn off their check engine lights."
Sure.
Fine. But meanwhile, because as you know, I've been working with a bunch of other manufacturer cars now doing wiring harnesses, and like the Toyota guys got this figured out 30 years ago.
How
But
so?
Toyotas have always been,
Because they were running on standalones since 30 years ago.
but they
Right.
they were more exclusive. I mean, the Subaru is crazy accessible
Yeah.
because of the Cobb stuff, and as a result, became
Oh,
a
that's-
well-supported
that's
aftermarket.
fair.
I think, right? Like
That's
it's
fair.
Well, I'm trying to think
What's
where
a well-supported aftermarket? You can buy injectors.
Hondas. They're the
you
new
can buy-
Hondas, right?
You can
Like
buy injectors on eBay.
there's 8 different kinds of blow-off valves you can put on your top mount. Like it's, or at least 8 different kinds
At
of
least
blow-off
yeah.
valves, right?
way more than that.
How many lug
That-
nut options are there for Subarus now?
Oh my god.
You can get spikes, hearts, all sorts of stuff, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's, but I mean, it's goofy. But I think because of that accessibility,
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's not fair for you. Name a Toyota, like aftermarket enthusiast right now, that is like think of one in your head right now. I can think of a billion Subaru people. I can't think of
a
one
person?
like Toyota person right now.
Yeah, but how many Subarus versus Toyotas have you owned?
I can think of way more people that are enthusiasts.
Yeah,
I was a
like-
Toyota
like
off-road guy
trucks
for a while.
and stuff.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
4Runners, Land Cruisers, that sort of thing.
But so it's and sure there's Subaru off-road thingies too, whatever. The point I'm trying to make here is like the Subaru to Toyota aftermarket thing. Maybe Cobb held back another level of development by making what they had, but it also made the Subaru as successful, or continues to be as successful as
it
what
made
it
them
is.
made them
because
way
of
more
that,
accessible up
Yeah.
to like that race car threshold. The initial race car threshold still made it more accessible.
Right? Mhm.
But like we talked about when we put the Haltech in the Pikespeed car, if I would have really understood what we would have been gaining by putting in a standalone in the race car, would have done it way sooner.
Right. Anything other than your fun daily, your stage 2 plus car or whatever, then yeah, everyone should have gone standalone 10 years ago, right?
Well, but this is the gray area of do you put a standalone in a street car, and the simple answer, the most direct answer is no. And I mean, really, standalone should be for race cars.
Maybe you don't.
Yeah.
I don't. I don't think it should be done.
Yeah, I don't know.
One, it's not legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
In Colorado.
get that out of the
In
way.
Colorado.
Get that out of the way.
Colorado.
Yeah.
There's other states where it's still kind of sort of legal to do that. I mean, technically it's not federally legal, but
There's non-emissions inspected counties within Colorado.
yeah, for the
I mean, technically, it's illegal in those states, and it's still illegal in.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this with full awareness of my glass house. I'm not a proponent of being a good little rule follower.
Yeah,
But
this is why I say you should put a standalone in, because if you are in a non-emissions place, or you're doing, Christ, you got a GD, you got your 06 STI, it just blew its 7th engine, and you're like tired of mucking with your intake around the TGV.
Subarus are reliable. That doesn't make any sense.
So you're tired of mucking with your intake around the TGVs. So you're just like, all the shit in the trash, all the air pump broke, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
And then what do you do? You put the bare minimum in. You make it run, you make it go, and then I can't use my access port anymore. Open source. No, don't do that. Nobody should be open source tuning Subarus. The Subaru ECU is already like a limited pile of junk.
Is it still true with the new ones?
Yes, they are the same
yeah.
ECU from 04 effectively up to 21.
Is it really?
The only difference is
That sucks. I had no idea.
Oh yeah.
Different
Man,
inputs.
only get a GD. There's no reason to get any other Subaru. GCs maybe if you're into that ultimate lightweight overlooks,
Right.
because GCs
Right.
are ugly. GDs are beautiful, slightly more heavy. But
I
but
don't
that
know.
is-
Every
that
time
is
I look
Tasso
at the
at
front of
OTC
a
racing.
I want to
yeah,
love it.
don't do at me. I'll fight
Yeah.
you on that. Let's go.
Yep.
Tarps
Yeah.
off.
Yep.
He's got the ugliest GD in existence, actually.
Me?
Yeah,
Hawkeye?
Which one?
the one that you can't tell if it's a GD from behind anymore.
Oh yeah. No, it's gonna
Anyway.
be sick. It will be
Anyway,
per
we'll see.
rules. It will be a recognizable make and model.
Okay.
In any case, so this is the engine management on Subarus from the factory is not like the engine management from the Euros or even a Ford, for Christ's sake. The engine management from Subarus is very limited. It's designed around MAF tuning, doesn't have any good sensors in it. No oil temp sensor, no throttle manifold sensor or anything like that. Meaning that's why they blow up. No, you don't got a freaking oil pressure gauge on your dashboard. Now we're better. VB's got a nice little oil temp situation going on.
But no oil pressure.
Christ, I don't even know if they have a sender for the oil pressure. Are they still a switch?
There's, I think so. There's, we're still getting into. There's an oil temperature
I'm gonna
gauge.
bring by my
There's-
fancy scanner. We're gonna find out what the VB has
Okay.
to offer. But
Sure.
as soon as you go to a Link or a Haltech or whatever in your Subaru, even if it's a Link plug and play, you can start getting oil. You can start getting an engine management system that limits your RPM when your oil temp is 280 degrees. You can start getting
True.
an engine management system that actually can support a wideband in the engine management.
So
You know?
So yeah, I mean the biggest reasons that I would go to a standalone in the race car way sooner is for all of the data that the data logging that you can do, the sensors that you can add, and the safeguards that you have way more control over versus being tied to the factory safeguards with SOC ECU, the access port. I still think that, like again, for a street driven car, for a less modified car, is it minimalist? Yes, but are there like 2 or 3 key sensors that Subaru could have added and made the functionality of the stock ECU way better? Yes.
My argument is just between open source, so you can't use your Cobb anymore. You can't use your access port anymore. What do? Don't go open source. Go buy a $1,200 standalone.
Go stock.
Well, but so
Or
here's
stock.
Go stock. Yeah.
so here's or go stock. But
if
so
you can,
here's
if you can find stock.
the biggest reason that I have always said that I really don't think standalones are for street cars is because what you're missing with a standalone is all of the testing and calibration for weird fringe conditions that the OEs do, and that they kind of build all these conversion tables into their factory modeling, so that
I don't think there's as many conversion tables because I went deep on this when I was trying to hunt E85 cold start non-TGV stuff. And even when you went into like the JDM cars, which didn't have TGVs and their cold start fueling maps and stuff like that, and then like the dew point of ethanol and stuff like that,
Well,
it's not like the factory
okay,
stuff was
have-
that complicated. It was just super dumb.
Yeah.
It was too
Sure.
dumb to be smart enough to get itself into trouble.
Have you
kind
ever
of thing.
looked at if you ever look at the mappings on a GR, or even look at the engine bay on a GR, so like a 2013 WRX, go look at that engine bay. It has fuel dampeners everywhere.
right.
The fuel systems
Yeah.
on the GRs
Yeah,
famously
yeah.
suck, right? They have in their engine mapping all sorts of hilarious compensation tables that are like slightly messing with the injector pulse width at various points to try to balance out.
Right.
And my bone stock GR still gets really stumbly on certain hills, on
Right.
certain cold days, going, like
Well, I guess
the factory engine management from Subaru, especially from what I've seen for like for the later cars like the 11 and 13s, they suck. Those factory tunes suck. Think of how many people are like bone stock cars, engine blows up.
so. Well, yes. I don't want to get completely derail off the point I was trying to get to, which was that,
Too bad.
when you but let me get there.
You shouldn't have
It's
invited
when
the
you have a
dog.
stock
Yeah.
car,
Uh-huh.
and like we're now in the fall, and so the weather's changing a lot. So like this morning, I woke up and it was like 38 degrees, and it's supposed to be like mid 70s. But the stock car, or with the car that is running a stock ECU with a mild reflash on it, you're never going to have a problem with the car starting, running. I mean, it can be crazy cold temperatures. You can drive over mountain passes. There's a lot of
Okay.
that stuff in there. But then like when we were testing with the Pikes Peak car, and we go up to Pikes Peak and it's the elevation, like Harvey was always looking at and making some small adjustments to the calibration, because like he wasn't able to test at high elevation when he was tuning the car. You kind of got to get the car
That's
up there.
very different. And by the way,
True.
if you take a stock, like if you take my GR up Pikes Peak right now and you race it, you'll blow the engine because you'll overspeed the turbo.
Sure. Well,
No.
I guess this is my point, is that what I think that's
So no, that's not a valid comparison.
well, but the thing that people miss is, when especially now, or especially right after Greenspeed, as pro standalone as everybody got, is they were missing kind of this like good usability and reliability in a broad range of weird fringe conditions, be it temperature, atmospheric pressure, and all that sort of thing. Where sometimes switching over to the standalone, you don't have that because the tuners are not putting all of the R&D
I
into
don't buy
it.
that because
You don't think so?
for how long? Okay,
Well, here's what I can tell you is, like, up until
I
very
gotta-
recently, there was a
yeah.
lot of people that were running standalones. That, like, I knew people that were running
Yeah.
standalones, daily driving them around here, but they were like always kind of massaging the maps or working on little
So-
drivability issues.
Ethanol, by the way, just makes tuning a giant pain.
Sure,
So that is,
sure.
if you're running on ethanol, you're going to have all sorts of problems because, and honestly, it's just a thing of getting an ethanol cold start right. Just takes work. It takes
Yeah.
extra work,
Yep.
and you got to
It's
remember,
not easy.
as soon as you make a car flex fuel, you're suddenly making two tunes. You're making the gas tune and you're making the ethanol tune, and you got to spend a lot of time on the ethanol tune.
Sure.
So okay, forget ethanol. We're gonna take that out of the equation because we're trying to say, I have a 2013 WRX right now. In my perfect world, I put a link plug and play in it, and I go to Harvey and tune it to put like slightly bigger injectors,
Yeah.
slightly bigger turbo, and I can still put the stock ECU back and go on the rollers for emissions. That's kind of my plan with that car at the moment. Right?
Okay.
I think Harvey can do a perfectly fine gas tune on that car. They
Oh,
can
for sure.
perfectly fine ethanol tune. Yeah.
It's not.
And you
it's,
know what?
It's
I
not
can't-
on the
I
dynos.
can't-
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't go to him and say, "Hey, open source tune this for me." Nobody wants to do that. Tuners hate doing it. You know, as a customer, when you're like, if you open source ethanol tune a Subaru, your thing is never going to want to start in the winter. You know, it's really hard to get that stuff to work on open source tunes. It's a lot easier on a standalone. And then
I agree with that.
and then
There's too many compensation tables.
there's too many
Yeah,
tables. And if you actually want to do flex on a stock ECU, you've got to use one of the not aftermarket, what do you call it? Basically one of the hacker patches. You know, that's the lines coming down, that's the numbers falling down the screen stuff. You can go get a Russian guy to remote into your ECU and jailbreak it. And then you can run all the Cobb features. You can run live tuning. You can run flex fuel. You can do all that crazy stuff. The problem is, every so often, it's like, oh, this car just like caught fire. Why? Oh, well, there was a bug in the flash. I'm like, oh.
Well, and I guess
This car
I
is
think
working
now
right.
more than ever before,
Good.
people just want to get in their car and drive it,
Right.
and we
like
don't
a
want to
stock.
have issues. Yeah, it's like it was stock. We don't want to have issues. We don't want to have to fight it. We don't want to. You don't want to deal with like the.
You want to get in your car and drive it, and also have the fun of I drive a modified Subaru. Buy a VAWRX, bolt-ons. Go give.
I'm thinking the
Or
VB.
stock.
I'm throwing my hat over here. Yeah.
Come on. It's a modified.
If you want a car built after 2007, do you want to have a fun car? Go get a different car.
I wouldn't go that extreme.
Go get the most Euro Subaru ever made, the VBWRX.
I think there's a lot of potential in the VB, and I'm really excited about kind of exploring it, not to a crazy level, but to a moderate level. And we've kind of got a plan of what we want to do with it, and I think it's going to be fun.
How much does a car weigh?
30.
You got to put it on the scale, and we're going to find
32,
out.
No, it's still less than 32, isn't it?
No way.
I thought so, but supposedly they're actually more like 34.
Yeah, there's no way it's 31.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Subaru said, when I was at the launch, Subaru said they were like 3,200.
Yeah.
But now people are putting them on scales and saying they're more like 34. So you got to put it on scales. We're going to do it. We're gonna
Dry
find
weight.
Yeah,
They've
maybe.
waited before they painted it and put oil in it and stuff. No, there's just no way it's that light, because if nothing else, like crash safety standards keep going up every year, and they keep making cars heavier, and that's a whole other part of this thing that I think is really important. That these conversations so often revolve around tuning motor and power and stuff like that, right? But like your Dodge Demon makes 8,000 horsepower or whatever. I don't know anymore these days. But it's 40,000 pounds, and that's just an incredibly heavy car, which is. When you're talking about top speed runs, then weight has less to do than like horsepower and aerodynamics and stuff like that. Fine. So if you want to go pull I-25,
but
it's
handling
a
brakes.
different conversation, right? But it's like if you plug into the equation more than just power, and the equation being fun cars, modified cars, stuff like that, more than just power, then pretty quickly. Any of these modern cars have significant issues, and I don't think that they're addressable all that much. And so, to the point of the conversation, over the last 5 years, what has changed? A horsepower war happened. For sure. But no one talked about anything else, because you can't, you put down the curb weight of a car on a sales sheet, and no one's going to go, oh shit, did you hear about the new Challenger? It weighs 100 pounds less. But they put, 50,000 more horsepower on it, and everyone's like, yeah, cool, I'll pay, an extra 24 months of financing to afford that. That's fine. I don't know.
The best mod I've done on my GR, you know what it is?
Take the back seat out.
No.
Hold on.
That
Carbon fiber hood.
No. It made the car way more fun for me to drive.
Brakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I put fucking Brembos on it.
Yeah. It's funny we both went the same place. And I'm not even like a do the brakes and work on that behind the wheel first kind of guy. Like, fuck it, man, make it your car whatever you want. But it's funny, like, fuck, man, bad brakes make everything bad to drive.
Yes.
Holy
And for
smokes.
some reason, Subaru has been way too content to let the WRX have bad brakes for way too long.
Yeah.
So, Brembos are an option, again, with the TR, and actually the TR Brembos, we're kind of excited about them.
I'm wondering, I gotta look this up. What's the rotor size difference between the Brembo option and the stock brakes? Because the stock brakes on the VB are not small.
It's the legacy brakes. So the front rotors, correct me in the comments. Front rotors should be 316s, and the rear should be 290s, and then with the 6-piston, 2-piston, basically the TR/STI Brembos, it's a 340 front and I think it's 328 in the rear.
The VA STI has 340 fronts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought they were still.
Yeah. The Brembo 6-pistons that came onto the STI, which are now the same as what is on the TR.
Yeah, okay.
It was a 340 millimeter rotor, which is not as big as, like, a lot of the big brake kits went from 328 up to 355.
Right.
Well,
the stock STI, the GD, the GR, those were all before the 4 pistons were all 320s.
Right. So the Goldies and the black
Goldies and blacks.
Brembos were 328 front, 316 rear.
Is it a 320 front? It's 328.
328. Yeah. 328 millimeter front rotor.
320 front, but okay.
No. The thing is 328.
320.
No,
Sure.
328.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, but now it went from that up to 340, and so basically, like,
That's a big difference.
so
But I think that's, and even in this conversation, it's going to be another one of those things that I don't know if people are going to disagree with me on.
They did the 340s because it makes wheel fitment better. So like all the 340 millimeter front rotor and caliper will fit all the way back to the 2008, no, 18s. They'll fit all of the 2008 and up STI wheels, clear those Brembos.
That's impressive.
And I think those all have plenty of power. None of them have enough cooling for a true track setup, or heat management anyways, for a true track setup, I think. But the feel of the brakes, I'm going to argue, is going to be one of the most important things. And I think to that, and I think what people should try if they're like, what should I do to my car to really improve my driving experience, is manual brakes.
Wow.
Non-boosted brakes. And it comes with some, I think it's maybe still like standalones were back in the day. It's something that every race car is doing, but it seems like black magic to you. So leave it to the pros.
A lot of race cars that still have boosters.
Okay,
what kind of race cars that still have boosters?
What kind of cars? Yeah, well, they're slow. I mean, they're just not as good at drivers, right? Which is fine if that's where you're at.
They do left foot braking though, which is hilarious with the booster.
Well, they're not really then. They're just doing overly complicated single foot braking if they're still doing with boosted brakes.
At this point, this is pretty deep in the weeds. We need to explain what we're talking about here.
Tradition.
Brake booster deletes, manual brakes. What are we talking about? Explain what this is.
So, it's hard for an OEM guarantee that all brakes are going to be reliable and consistent enough and maintained well enough. So the easier thing for them to do is to cheat and add a vacuum booster. That way, even if you have a bad bleed and all this kind of stuff, they can still give you the feeling of powerful brakes, even if your brake system sucks. And that's my argument for why vacuum boosters exist, or if you have particularly heavy vehicles.
And the consistency and wanting to make sure that every single person that gets behind the wheel of the car.
It takes a really wide range of potential variables and make them consistent to a narrower range.
So a brake booster turns the brake pedal into a stop pedal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I mean, shit. You could drive a car and stop with just the handbrake, but you got to be, you gotta modulate. You gotta feel the feedback. You gotta know what you're doing. A brake booster just lets you step on the pedal that stops the car, and the car stops.
So what this is in your engine bay, like if you get out of your Subaru and it's a left-hand drive Subaru and you come around and you look in the engine bay, it's this big black tank looking thing, because it is a tank. It's holding a vacuum, and that's what your brake master cylinder bolts to.
I mean, it's simple. You press, the brake pedal is connected to a piston, effectively.
Yeah.
The piston pushes on something, it pushes another piston, and just amplifies all the force you put.
Well, there's a diaphragm.
Right.
And so the diaphragm is using the vacuum.
But my point is, it amplifies the movement of your foot.
Yeah.
Because
the force.
The force.
The movement is translated into an amplified force.
Right.
Yep.
And the difference, I feel like a lot of people probably have not driven manual brakes cars, even though that used to be a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Or if they have, they've driven a car with the brake booster unplugged, which is not the same as a manual car.
That is terrifying.
That's terrifying. Or they've run out of vacuum at some point trying to left foot brake because they think that's what they're doing.
But this is a point I want to make, is that if you take your stock car, your regular car with a brake booster, and just remove the booster, you will ruin your brakes and you will not be able to stop the car effectively, because the entire braking system in the car is designed around
Yep.
including
because of mechanical advantage.
Sure.
And hydraulics.
Yep.
Because of the way the pedal is installed in the car, the way the proportion valve works,
the sizes of the master and slave cylinders. Yeah. Everything is based around the booster being there. So if you just yank the thing out, you may well not be able to stop.
Save a ton of weight.
Yeah.
And it cleans up the engine compartment.
All right, now but
it screws everything up.
Really quick, and let's just talk about left foot braking. Okay, so cliff notes are.
Here's why I don't like vacuum boosters, which is going to get into left foot braking and stuff like that. The amount of actual force applied to the brakes, like the stopping force at the wheel, is inconsistent. It has to do with how much vacuum is in there, how far the pedal travels.
And how much
and
vacuum
those
is
are
in.
right. And that's the vacuum being in there is kind of one of the main variables here. You take a turbo car, it's spending a lot of its time not in vacuum. more so than an NA car.
Well, so there's a check valve on the turbocharged car. So usually on a naturally aspirated car, it would be connected to the manifold, which is always going to be under vacuum. So it uses the vacuum from the intake manifold to supply the vacuum to the brake booster.
Both cars make vacuum when they're in overrun. When you're off throttle body's closed, they both make vacuum.
Yeah, but because turbocharged cars pressurize the manifold when you're on throttle or on boost, there's a check valve so that the positive pressure gets stopped, so that the positive pressure can't get to the booster.
Now it's worth saying every time you use that brake, you use up some of that vacuum.
Yep.
Right. So if you're not replenishing that vacuum, which is if you're not consistently drawing air out of that, this is because of vacuum is not really being replenished, it's being revitalized.
Right. So the idea is that you're going to be on the brakes when the manifold is in vacuum because your throttle pedal is now on the brake, so the manifold is under vacuum. So you're using the brakes when the manifold is under vacuum.
Right. Yeah. So this is true for Subarus, but there are other cars out there that don't have.
You can run a vacuum pump.
Right, they have vacuum pumps.
Yeah.
They have they have other
which is
ways
silly.
of
You're
powering.
adding systems now to overcomplicate a system that works just fine if you build it simply and correct the first time.
But because a lot of people listening are Subaru people are watching, so they have Subarus, and so they're in the circumstance where you have a check valve connected to your booster. That if you have a turbocharged car and you start touching the brake when you're on the throttle, and the manifold's under positive pressure, things start to happen.
You'll notice a little bit. You'll notice more feedback in the brake pedal.
Yeah. Well, but at a worst case scenario, so I think to your point, the left foot braking with the booster is bad because it's not consistent. You don't have good modulation.
Right.
But
without going into a whole lecture about why would someone left foot brake, there's a bunch of reasons. Controlling the weight balance of the car, controlling diff logic if you have that there's a bunch of different reasons. You could be left foot braking. Or you could just be working that transition faster. Because if you have to come over and come back, this is my comment about if you're rallying with a vacuum booster in a stock circuit, like without a vacuum pump or some other way of controlling that boost, you're not really left foot braking. You're just kind of weirdly one foot braking with an extra foot involved, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't really truly, because you push it once, it probably works fine. Twice, maybe 3 times, you're out of vacuum at that point.
This is the word of caution here, is that if you're left foot braking with all the stock plumbing and everything implied, you can deplete the vacuum in the booster. Yeah. And you will know that you've done this because then that next time you get on the brake pedal, it is rock hard and you have to push for all your worth because you don't now have the vacuum.
But the next thing you do, though, is you take your foot off the accelerator because what the hell's going on? This brake pedal isn't working. It's going to start creating vacuum. Your brake pedal is in really far because you're getting no boost. It'll start creating no boost. You're getting no assist.
Yeah.
It'll start creating vacuum. It'll start giving you assist. And the next thing you know, you're locked up and you're going forward. And you haven't changed your pedal position at all. But the force actually applied to the wheels has changed because the vacuum assist has
now
increased.
But to be fair, a brake booster delete properly done in a way that actually makes the car handle better is a big mod.
I don't think so with... There's servo boxes.
He's saying big mod in its significance.
And the servo box, because we did this in Cameron's car, I am not a fan of how that works because the brake pedal doesn't work correctly.
Which one do you have?
This is the one that we talked about, comp brake.
Okay. Yeah.
The problem with it is that the factory brake pedal in every single car with a brake booster is designed to have a brake booster in front of it, so its point of leverage doesn't actuate a manual cylinder correctly. It doesn't actuate it with enough leverage.
Is it a leverage issue or a swing issue?
It's both, actually. It's both.
Because a leverage issue you can just make up with master cylinders. What size masters do you have?
The ones that they supply.
I don't know what they supply.
It's a leverage and a swing issue because you can fix the leverage problem slightly by moving the attachment point to the pedal, but then you have less swing.
And it used to be the cheap way in the rally community to go to manual brakes. Is you get either a booster delete plate that goes against the firewall, like L&E still makes one maybe, which is wild because it's the simplest design, but they've been making it for more than a decade. Love you guys. Or you get like the STI servo delete or something like that, right? There's a bunch of these. The Group N cars obviously had to have a homologated version.
Right.
They're all manual brakes. You're getting a drift here where every non-hyper dollar motorsport car nowadays has been, even the hyper dollar ones, 12-15 years ago were manual brakes across the board for the most part. Formula One has always been bonkers. sports car
It
racing.
does not apply.
Yeah.
But if you look
But
at
so
the
then,
servo,
let me finish. The rest of that grassroots manual brake conversion is you just move the pedal attachment point for the clevis up about the width of one hole.
right?
And that's what the old knowledge was you take the diameter of hole you're going to go, you put one hole in between, you make another hole, you move the clevis up there, you've adjusted your leverage ratio. It's all mechanical advantage, right? You got to make up, distance for work at some point here in this thing, right? We're doing it at the lever, at the pedal. It's fine, and you have the cheapest way. You can reuse your stock master it is, right?
Yeah. That is a cheap way. But go look at it actually like a pedal box, a racing pedal box, and the throw of the brake pedal and the clutch pedal too is way bigger.
Yeah.
So it gives you way more range of motion.
So I want to just kind of quantify this. So like if you're gonna go to manual brakes, you have to consider basically the best way to do it.
Your advantage back.
The best way to do it is with like a pedal box. So like a replacement pedal box, so you have the dual masters or something like that, so you can adjust bias as well as all this. But it's you have to consider the size of the master cylinder with the brakes themselves, and then just how much pedal force you have, and you've got to make sure that you've got enough. You can move enough volume with the brake pedal throw to fully lock the brakes up and have enough wiggle room, so that like if you can physically get the pedal all the way to the bottom of its travel, you have enough stopping force so the car is going to fully stop the way that you want it to. You don't.
I'm laughing about this because I know a lot of people who I do not want to listen to this podcast because I do not want them to hear, oh, I should modify my entire brake system.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's not small.
Here's okay, Subaru designed. I promise you, Subaru spent more time designing the brakes in the car than they did the cold start compensations at 10,000 feet.
That's true.
Probably because if the car doesn't start,
you could screw yourself up here. So Don't mess with this unless you're confident in messing with it. The point is, it's also simpler than you think to get it pretty right. I own my first pedal box is going to a car that's not done yet. Up until this point, I have never even owned a dual master setup. That I've been on manual brakes since I rally crossed the car because I immediately recognized how bad vacuum boosters were. And I have a hard time going back now. I can drive them daily. I can drive a vacuum booster car. But the second the helmet goes on, my foot just goes into manual brake mode, and I cannot figure out. I lock up tires. I go through the windshield with my face. I get inconsistent. And it's nothing. Remember, I drove your car a couple years ago, and you were asking me, like, are you doing something weird with your braking technique or something like that? I'm like, no, I cannot drive a boosted car. I don't know what the fuck's going on. This is... And I mean, eventually you kind of figure it out a bit, and it's...
This is like every time I drive my car with the HD clutch, and then I go into another car, put my foot through the firewall.
Yeah,
right.
It's things that you just get used to, and then they become... So it's going to be more finicky, having manual brakes, to things like bleed quality. If you have pad knockback issues, it's going to be way more apparent because you're moving every little bit. You might tell you your hubs are starting to go, but you might also realize you've been driving around with bad hubs or a bad hub design for your application for the entire life of the car.
Right.
Factory GD WRX hubs are just not as sturdy. You will get pad knockback issues even if the hubs are in good shape and you're turning really hard on whatever surface. And it's going to become apparent for the most part. You can get lucky with really good, like if you start blueprinting hubs and stuff. Or I've never found a 5x100 hub. No, that's not true. The early STI ones were still pretty good.
You know what hubs are really solid in our 5x100? GR hubs.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Hold on. But the rear ones don't have any of the right attachment points for McPherson suspension, so they're not that good at hubs in the first place. So, I don't have enough experience. I love talking shit about GRs. I've never actually.
I'm serious. Everybody says 5x100 is crap for racing because of the weakness in the bearings. The GR has a much bigger bearing. The GR bearing is the same size as the STI bearing from the GD.
Yeah, so fair enough, right? I came off of 03 STI hubs, which were I could get multiple seasons of hill climbing out of a set of wheel bearings without knockback issues, and in one race on 5x100 WRX hubs, I would be having trouble with bearing wear.
But the other key difference with the GRs is that the hub and bearing is a complete unit that just bolts onto it. You don't have to press things in and press things out.
Which STI stuff went to at some point, but even like
2005.
I'm saying, the 03 STI hubs were old press-in stuff, and even that, hold them side by side, they looked really similar. It's literally a stronger hub because it was, again, they're all homologation specials at that point, right?
You know where STI got those hubs?
The GR? They just went 10 years in the future?
The SVX.
No, it's funny.
Honda's?
SVX.
Oh, okay.
SVX used the STI bearing before the STI existed.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we all owe our existence to SVXs in some way or another.
That's right.
But so anyways, to the point, manual brakes, there's going to be a couple things that are going to, you have to pay a little bit more attention to. To some people, paying more attention to stuff like that might be part of what they like about
part of the appeal,
aftermarket of modifying cars, right? And in the grander sense of maybe the topic of the podcast here, I think so often, where's tuning a car compared to where it was 5 years ago? If it's literally tuning the motor and horsepower stuff, it's a more complicated world.
Yep.
But if you gave me, I was going to say 100, but I probably would notice that. 40 less horsepower in a car, yeah, I probably would notice it. Yeah. But if I had a 40 horsepower less car with really good consistent brakes and a 40 horsepower more car with vacuum brakes that were just yada-yadaing their way through life, short of a drag race probably, I would go for the lower horsepower car because that is so important.
Like if you had better suspension brakes,
I still say, okay, if you want a better lap time at high plains and you got a GR, you don't need more power.
Let's wait.
You need
brakes.
You need Brembos. You actually need the STI Brembos. You do not. You can't do a stock power, stock brakes in a GR. You can't do a lap at high plains.
Well, and the scariest thing about the GR rears is the size of the rear pads. The rear pads are, it's almost to the point where why did they even put them back there?
Yeah.
They're so tiny. Can they do anything?
So I ran 4 pots. My personal best time in my Subaru, which is several iterations ago, was like a 202 or something like that.
Yeah.
But that was VF36, so not even much more power than stock.
Yeah.
But on 4 pots.
But even with
they were glowing.
I was going to say, you had to.
I would come off the track and people would wave me down like, "Hey, you must have a stuck caliper or something like that." I'm like, nope, that's just how it works.
4 pots.
Get out of the way. I need to keep driving for 10 minutes so I don't catch on fire. Get out of my way. So
400 horsepower on the Baja with 4 pots?
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But good brakes make a big difference. And if there's any kind of silver lining, it's kind of what you were getting at, Tasso, to the fact that adding power is now not as easy. It's now you get to add brakes, now you get to add suspension. You get the brakes and suspension to work good. And to a certain extent, long term, that's more rewarding, I think.
Well, you should have been doing it the whole time anyways.
Should have been doing it the whole time.
But you still have this meat and potatoes of modifying a car available to you without the government even noticing that you modified your braking and safety systems.
Well, but once you have that confidence-inspiring braking system and suspension, the car is just so much more fun to drive. Mm-hmm. You're not worried about pushing too hard because you're going to nuke the brakes. The brakes are going to catch on fire. There's going to be some point where you hit the brake pedal and the car just doesn't stop and you just see sparks.
I honestly wonder about that because, again, how many people who 350, 400 horsepower WRXs, STIs, and I can tell you from experience, I cannot drive a 400 horsepower STI without almost putting it into a wall because I overrun the brakes.
If they haven't been, if the brakes haven't been set up to compensate with power, yeah, totally.
Yeah. Hell, I've overrun the brakes at high plains in a stock VA. Mm-hmm. That's mostly because it was oh, that first lap was fun. Oh, that second lap was fun. Let's do a third, right?
They'll tell you before they go.
Yeah.
You get indications, but it's happening.
Not always.
But so think about the other aspect of modifying cars is clout rolling up to Cars and Coffee. If you have squealing ass pads, you can't put down 500 horsepower in the parking lot of Cars and Coffee, or you can once, but then you never come back. But you can squeal into every parking spot you've ever been at with your Hawk A, whatever loud pads, right? And people will think to themselves, fuck yeah.
Yep.
It's like the cam for non-LSs.
That's
is,
true.
Is
Yeah.
squealy brake pads for.
Yeah. If you have
for
squealy
hot
brake
boys.
pads and it won't be idle.
That's
Yeah.
like if
Cars
you
gonna
know,
be
you
fast.
know kind of
You
thing.
unplug your MAF and put squealy brake pads in there, and no one will know that you're not making 800 horsepower when you're rolling up to Cars and Coffee. Not a power issue though; it's a cooling issue, and that's where brake
cooling
modification
for
really
brakes,
comes
yeah.
in. Yeah. It's a Sorry, not motors.
Yeah. Well,
Both
but
of these things, I guess, could apply to motors too.
And
But for
then-
brakes, right? It's not a brake power issue for the most part that people need to upgrade. It's a cooling issue or a
Right.
consistency issue, right?
So pads will help you a little bit there, and brake fluid will help you somewhat as well.
Mhm.
but only to an extent.
Right. I mean, sooner or later you're gonna warp your rotors after one lap. Which again, stock GR, stock brakes, stock power.
Oh man, yeah.
Warped rotors after one lap.
Yeah, and not confidence inspiring. That's
No,
for sure.
it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, and like having the confidence is and that's where suspension setup comes in, because having the confidence that like the car can handle this corner, the car can carry speed through the corner, that you're not going to slide, you're going to feel grip, all this sort of thing. Confidence.
Seat, I think, is another one of these things
Seats,
that I've been on my. It has literally been probably 130 podcasts since I said this last time.
Yeah.
But driver ergonomics is got to be like the most important thing for I think, or within reason, to driving fast. And also, it feels like a tuned ass car, even if you have a stock exhaust, but you have to slip into a fixed back, high bolstered bucket, and throw a harness on.
When you're really sitting in a bucket seat, like the amount of communication you get through the seat of the pants, like to know what the rear end of the car is
and if
doing.
you're not
like
having to brace against the door card with your off knee just to stay in your seat.
Yep.
And I know there's been all the way back to the CG lock.
Man.
We go back to the
So this is a lap belt lock system, which is a little bit.
To lock you in with the 3-point?
Yeah.
So it's just factory harness. It essentially was you would tighten the lap belt really hard and then just tighten this little essentially cam on your belt itself, and it would keep your lap belt really tight to hopefully keep your hips stable.
So my Baja still has the stock seat belts in it, so whenever I track it or do any kind of
pull the seatbelt out and get it scratchy.
I slide my seat all the way back, lock the seatbelt, and then ram my seat forward.
Does your driver's seatbelt lock?
Yes.
Oh man, that's not great. Usually they don't do that, I thought.
No, I think they do. I think all seatbelts do. Like if you fully extend.
No, not driver's seats normally.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's like a car. I used to be a child passenger seat technician.
That's
I'm pretty sure that most driver's seats
No,
don't
they
do.
At least
I mean, I believe you guys that you have this experience.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to detract from
only the
only
old cars, only GDR stuff. The
I
newer
don't
stuff
know.
doesn't. The newer stuff uses the.
I don't think my GD
airbag
seatbelt
thing.
locked.
Oh yeah.
My GD had the
Really?
explosive tightening seatbelts
Well,
I think
because I pulled it out. I was like, this is
we'll
I'm
have
gonna
to
save
we'll
this
have to
for something.
explore some cars. Like,
Yeah,
look
I don't
at-
know. I wouldn't.
There's one right there that also does that.
Yeah. I mean, my Dodge definitely doesn't. My impression is that it's always been like a safety measure, so you don't lock yourself into your seat too tight as a driver and not be able to reach controls that you need.
Because
But other seats use it for like.
and if you have to
installation.
get out and you're ratcheted in and there's a lot of tension, you're not going to be able to.
It
pull
will
this.
tension, and that's part of like the like pyro tensioners and stuff like
Yeah.
that they had as a suit. We're getting way off into this. Is not what aftermarket cars are about. The point is, there have been a bunch of ways to like tension you and hold you in your seat for like stock classes for autocross and shit like that, right? Where you can't replace the seat. The answer is to get seats.
Yeah.
And even a little bit of improvement in a seat makes a big difference. People go
Hmm.
back and forth on like the 4-point bolt-in stuff. Or, like, this is safe. This is not safe.
Yeah.
I trust Schroth's rally belts or whatever, right?
The Schroth solution is a unique one in that one of the
Will release
Is a
in an
breakaway.
accident to keep you from submarining.
Yeah.
There's some research at least into that. You can make that decision for yourself. The other 4-point belts are not safe.
No.
And that also includes like the crushability of like a fixed back seat and like 5, 6, 7-point harnesses, but without a cage.
Yeah, I
you
mean,
get into
that's
some
that's-
wild
that's
stuff,
like-
right?
that's where like
If
getting
you have the 4 points in the car, then the bar probably came off at eBay.
The Schroth was designed to go to the back seat. I ran these for a while
That's-
when I was
that's
rally
different.
crossing.
This
Yeah.
right, okay,
and
sure.
in
but I'm
fact
saying-
it's designed it actually clips into the rear seatbelt buckles.
right.
It's that's a unique situation to Schroth.
But the point is, these are all solutions to increase driver attention, driver control, driver ergonomics, which I think not only it's going to make your car feel racy when you clip in a 4-point, if it's that kind of 4-point or whatever you
and
have.
you just the communication between you and the car is a lot more active because you just feel a little bit more of the rear end starting to slide.
This might be controversial as well. You know, you don't need to spend money on like you thought you used to. Tires.
Oh man, one of my best fun times at High Plains was on 340 treadwear, just Sumitumos or something like that, right?
No, that's
on
it.
a drying track. I was down on like not best times in sort of a lapse time. Although I think I did like a 206 or something like that. Like the same day.
The difference, what I mean by this is, newer tires like new as in within a year old are always better than 3-year-old tires, and both of those are light years ahead of 5-year-old tires. Doesn't matter how much tread is left on them.
True.
As soon as you're on 5-year-old tires, you're basically on like hockey pucks.
True.
Right? And Walmart has pretty darn good performance tires for $120 a corner. And
they're terrible.
Seriously, I have Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's on one vehicle, and I have Walmart $110 tires on another car, and I can't tell the difference. I honestly
There's
can't.
someone on their computer right now getting ready to type up because you're not good enough.
Yeah, maybe.
Well,
but that's my point. I didn't need to go spend the Michelin's are almost $300 a corner.
but what Tasso said, I remember distinctly. There was one year that I took my first WRX to, I'm going to date myself here, Second Creek Raceway, on the factory RE92s because it was like November, December. It was cold
in the 80s or
in the 80s. Yep. Pre-aughts, but it was one of the most fun track days that I've ever had because they didn't have the grip, and so there was more sliding. But because there was more sliding, things were happening at lower speeds and a lot more often, and so like you were starting.
They put Prius tires on a BRZ, right?
Right, and so you can have a good experience at the track on cheaper tires with less grip because that transition to grip to less grip happens earlier. But then the thing is like if you are taking the right line and you're not overstressing the tires, there is grip. It's harder to find. But if you can find the grip, that is actually a really important lesson that will pay you down the road.
And driving at the threshold is a really important lesson too. Like driving at grip threshold is and so you probably won't win the race that way if you're at a race. but
to know what it feels like when you have the tires that don't have a lot of traction and you nail the line and what that feels like versus to have the tires that don't have the grip and you don't nail the line and what that feels like. So when you know when you get it right, you know when you get it wrong, and then when you get stickier tires, because a lot of times stickier tires, it's like it masks a lot of lack of the ability to actually find the proper line because the grip level is just so much higher.
They also necessitate fixing other stuff to deal with the tires, right? Like suddenly oiling becomes an issue when you're pulling.
Sure.
You know, 6 or 9 Gs lateral and stuff like that.
I would also point out that, you know, in the rally community, since I co-drive and talk to a bunch of drivers about, going out to this race, it's like, so you got tires? I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's tires on the car.
Yeah.
That's the mentality. And there's the other guys who are like, yes, I brought 3 sets of Pirellis for this rally. It's like changing out every service or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, which is
and the guys who
brings up why
and the guys who do a set or maybe 2 sets for a whole season, they still win races.
And that's a weird thing about rally because attrition is many times the factor that decides those races, even at the pointy end of that sport. But it brings up why you're doing a thing in the first place, right? If you're out there to have fun, which is maybe your dual purpose daily driver, or your weekend warrior car or something like that, then cheaper tires will lower your barrier of entry and you'll still have fun on it. If you decide to start trying to race and win, which is a whole other thing, I do a lot of the stuff I do because I enjoy winning. Like I don't know if I would have stuck with cars as long as I did if I wasn't also good at it to some extent, right?
And you weren't able to have the success.
Right. So there's a certain aspect of it that, I got that dopamine hit by, podiums and stuff, right?
Sure,
and that kind of kept me going, and I'm grappling with that now that it's been 2 years since I like raced a car on dirt because I've been in this rebuild process and the dopamine's drying up and I'm like, why am I doing this thing?
Yeah.
Do I even enjoy this? But no, I do want to go do it again. But so you make that determination for yourself about why, if you're fun car, dual purpose daily, weekend warrior, want to have fun at the track, don't care about like putting down the fastest time for your car track record, but fastest time for yourself. You're trying to improve fundamentals, training, stuff like that. And yeah, cheaper tire is a great way to go, and gets you out there and having fun. So I don't think it's an unpopular opinion in that aspect. There's a lot of folks that do rally because they like going out and doing rallies, and it's as much fun for them if they're winning as if they're swapping a transmission overnight or something like that, right? And I don't
think anybody enjoys that.
No.
Yeah, but they keep going back for it, and I don't get those people, right?
I don't get that either.
I'm definitely the kind of person. That's one thing I like about hill climbing. If I lose a transmission, fuck it, I'm going home this weekend. I'm not gonna go find one at a junkyard in some small town and see if I can swap it in.
No,
I'm gonna go home, get drunk, and just not think about anything for a while. But some people are really into that, and that's why they're into stage rally, right? They're into like that slog to make it through this hard thing that they undertook, and so there's no knock on that, right? Like that's get dumber tires because it lowers your barrier of entry. You go out, you have fun, in whatever way.
And there's still a lot to learn with them.
Yeah, definitely.
Tangential, I suppose, but at Prescott Rally, the two happiest mother lovers at that race flipped their car at 110 miles an hour, something like that.
Oh man! Were they happy?
They were happy after.
They lived through that experience.
Yeah, because they were like 20 years old and it was their first rally ever.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they're hedge fund kids or whatever.
But it's part of the experience to some extent too. Like I honestly, I had a Rally Colorado one year. I went from first on the road to last or second to last on the road, missing a bumper, misfiring, all sorts of fun stuff like that. Like, and like the 4 spectators that show up for Rally Colorado, they're like standing there, woo, rally! And I'm like dragging body panels. I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Rally!
It's like, so there's an aspect that like, that part's cool. I get it, right?
All right. So as we're winding this down, I think what I'm hearing is that there is a potential positive in the fact that it is not as easy to build a high power / race car as it used to be. In that, now if you like driving cars, you've got to find ways to find the fun in these different cars in different ways. But if you find it fun and then you really want to keep going to the next level, well, then you build your purpose-built race car. So then you instead of trying to like live in that median zone in that gray area for so long, if you drive the car and you find the fun and you like the activity and you want to take it to that next level, you have to kind of jump to the next level instead of kind of mill about in that middle area.
Yeah, I think it's. I touch on this, and I say it a lot of times as a joke, but I think there's some reality to it too. If what makes you happy is having a shit ton of horsepower in a street legal car, a modern Subaru that meets emissions requirements is probably not the answer for you. Well, if what you want to do is tackle this like what obviously hard thing to tackle, fine, go for it, right? Then don't. I mean, we're not going to discourage you from doing that by saying what I just said anyways. So go ahead and continue to ignore what I just said because you were going to anyways, and go make your big horsepower, whatever Subaru. But if that's what's important to you, start with a different chassis. That's fine, right? There's a reason C5 Corvettes are slaughtering Time Attack, or at least the last time I paid attention to Time Attack, they're slaughtering because they're good and they make a ton of horsepower. Yeah. And if you want to run a street class, it's a street car with a big motor in it. That's fine, right? That's what's important to you. Get the right tool for the job. I think a Subaru, even the current ones, even though they're pretty dumb grocery getters, and the old scalpels that the GDs and GCs are great cars and make fun, fast tuner daily drivers, even now with emissions requirements, because a lot of the stuff that makes them great is not just straight up wheel horsepower.
It's the characteristics,
the whole
driving
feeling of the car, right? They're properly cars built for homologation. Right? There's not a whole lot of cars, even in that generation, that were, right? And so what that does to the character of a car, when you drive it around, even if you're not aware of the history, the competition history, and what homologation rules did to touring car, rally chassis for the time.
Yeah.
That stuff still filters through into making a good car, which is why Subarus have always been competitive cars in competition. And a lot of other cars have too, but not that many, right? Evos from the generation, they have their problems too. And they're horsepower cars, arguably, right?
And nobody rallies Evos anymore because they're too expensive.
It's way too expensive. So at least we're not in that boat, right?
Yeah.
Like it's,
Heck, yeah.
you know what? Celicas, right?
I'm just thinking,
Amazing.
So I've been around a number of Celica GT4s lately. I know somebody who just bought one from an importer for very obviously way too much money.
Oh no. Okay.
Which is fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's a cool car.
Yeah,
Super cool
Everything.
cars.
And his comment, what he said about the car to me is basically, oh, it's almost as good as a WRX.
Yeah.
And it's like 3 or 4 times the money of a WRX.
Wow.
Yeah.
But look at, the homologated DTM cars from the generation. They're legendary. They're expensive as hell now too, right? How many other homologation, and maybe comment below, I don't know if this is one of those drive up engagement on YouTube things. Comment below, what is another homologation car that you can get into that's as good as a Subaru? And I know they're not true homologation specials, right? I get it. We're not talking about an RAR or something like that, right? Which isn't even really.
Freaking Fiesta M Sport R2 or whatever the heck it is. This is the
still way more expensive than a Subaru.
Oh, it's way more expensive than a Subaru.
But they're cool.
Yeah, they're cool. And they're I wish.
Yeah. So, actually, honestly, this isn't just me challenging you. I want you to tell me because I want to go get some more cool cars, right? Like, what are other cool, cheap, not homologation special, but cars built to be homologatable in their special version for competition? Is that too much of a word salad to put it that way? But
no, I think I'm with you. I get it.
Yeah. There's some pretty sick versions of BMW cars like
yeah. But they're big money, and that's why E36s is the trickle down of that homologation work. And E36s, guess what? They're sick and they're popular,
and
right?
they're now crazy expensive.
And they're not crazy expensive because of the drift tax. Thank you, drifters. If you guys weren't so cool,
or just road racers. But I think that
I love drifters, and you guys have a
lines.
great style, and I hate that you ruin all good things by making them expensive. But I get it because you guys are cool. That sounds. I don't know. Sometimes I come across like a dickhead. That's honest love right there. So
I should start drifting my Outback and raise third-gen prices.
Yeah,
you should. That would be awesome.
Driving up Outback prices.
Yes.
Like, it'd be like the Volvo wagons again. DTM heritage, right? Like it's a
Actually, the Volvo, that might be an interesting one.
They're already going up.
Well, no, but an interesting answer to the question.
No, the Volvo's already check. No, other than the Volvo.
Yes.
Volvo, Mercedes, BMW, Subaru.
All right. Well,
Mitsubishi.
Okay. So any other key details you think we should hit on before we land this plane?
Oh, I don't know. This plane crashed a long time ago.
Oh,
it did.
It's a fun conversation. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I like GDs. I love being in a GD for racing stuff. But I also like GRs and VAs. And like, I have a GR that's mostly stock and gonna stay mostly stock. Like I said, best mod I did to that thing was brakes.
Yeah.
Now I can drive like a dick on the street and probably
apparently
not.
Oh boy.
I don't know if that's gonna make the cut.
No. That is not
Confidential
not podcast material.
No, but I'm serious. Like now I have a lot more confidence driving that dang thing. The other part is that I think when I got it, it had a crappy tire, like one really bad tire on it, like one tire that just made it so that every time it rained, it was like definitely not confidence inspiring, right? So tires, just new tires.
Yeah.
Not even amazing tires, just new tires and bigger brakes, and that is now a way more fun car. And then,
Brakes, tires, and suspension is the key to happiness.
And a catback.
And a catback.
And a good seat.
It has the SPT exhaust on it
Okay.
And that's like so good.
You guys have to hear the exhaust on the VB because it is shockingly loud and it's completely stock. It's stock.
I noticed that because of somebody at my blog still.
This is maybe the big. We're gonna open up cans of worms. I'm not going to California stuff. Don't worry about it. Disregard. Unless you're in California, in which case fight Lois laws.
Have you guys seen what I did to my other Outback, the 2010?
Nope.
So the exhaust was about to fall off because New Jersey car,
Okay.
and I still had a whole stock VA exhaust
Oh.
in my attic.
Oh.
And I was like, those hangers look like they're in kind of the same exact spots.
Are they?
Yes, they are in the exact same spots.
Subarus are Legos.
Yeah.
I had to cut and put a new flange on the headers because those
Okay.
all rusted.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
I now have quad.
Does
quad
it
tip.
honestly line up?
Yes.
But I thought the outback bumpers didn't have the opening.
I mean, you can make a hole.
I have
That
a
part's
sauce.
easy. It's hangers
Okay.
and the size and shape of the car.
That is true. That is the least invasive.
The routing is exactly the same.
Okay.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's the consumer advice you're not getting anywhere else.
That's right.
And you know what? It sounds really good
I bet it
because
does.
it's a flat six,
Huh.
Yeah.
and that the
Oh, it's probably way less aggressive mufflers because it wasn't
Turbo.
and they go back out instead of down
Yeah.
the wagons.
Yeah.
No, I'm so happy with that. Every time I turn on the
There you
car
go.
and it goes, brum, brum, and I'm like,
Tuning's not
Yeah.
dead. There we go.
There you go. That is a good soundtrack is not a bad thing.
Then there's your title too. Can you put VA exhaust on
STI exhaust
on
on an
a-
Outback.
3.6
Outback.
Outback.
Yes.
click
You can.
click for more? And then we're just gonna talk about brakes for an hour.
That's right. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. So thanks very much to you at home for watching. Thanks for your support as always. Be sure to check out Money Shift Rally and what Jeremy's up to, OTC Racing for what Tasso's up to, and yeah, check out our sweet merch, which has been sitting up here. But I'm just now mentioning it to you at the end, who are paying attention. We're working on some new stuff, and
I'm a big fan of this.
yeah, it's coming together well.
What's it?
Data or it didn't happen.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you this: if the car that I was in, Prescott, had a standalone, no blown head gasket. Just saying.
Yep.
Wouldn't have blown a head gasket because we would have been like, oh, the radiator hose is very obviously not there anymore.
I think going forward in the Pikes Peak car, now we know we're going to know immediately if we have any kind of a cooling issue or a head gasket issue, and we're just going to stop.
Yep. Standalones pay for themselves really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that aspect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And on that bombshell, thanks again at home for watching, and until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatiron Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.tuning.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.